Hi, and welcome to this series. Before we actually jump into programming, I want to give you a little introduction to our application. So, by the time we are done developing our application, we should have something similar to this, either of the simulators. And what we have is essentially a shopping list application that also connects to Firebase backend. So, what that means is users can choose to make different shopping lists, such as this user that has made a list called party, and it has some items in it that he or she wants to purchase. And then they can share this list with other users. So if another user is having access to this list, they can also view the same items as the original creator of the list. And that makes for a lot of different types of application. Any kind of application that you want to share data amongst different users, or you want to read the same amount of information from different users and you want to essentially dispatch it back to them, it would require some sort of backend handling, which for this case we use the backend of Firebase, and that's the one that is provided by Google. Is one of the most strongest and most versatile backends out there. And what you can do is, if you go to any of your simulators and you try anything, let's say I want to add a new list for this user on the right. So the list is going to be for office, and that automatically gets reflected on our backend. Now there is a new for office node that's going to maintain the information that our user has for the office. Now the other thing we could do is I could go in the for office, and I know the name of this user is John, the name of the user on the left is Amir. So I could say for office I have to buy some pens, and I could say now share this with Amir. And if such user actually exists, yes, there is an invitation sent to the other user. And the very next time that our user logs in, let's see that. Once our user is logged in now, he has access to the items for John, for the same list as John, and now they can both essentially collaborate on the same list. They can write stuff to it, they can read stuff from it, or they can cross them off. Now, before I move on to actual programming, I want to suggest that from time to time, please come back to this lesson throughout your development so you know what you are developing. Our view essentially has two very simple, interfaces. This is one interface that has got one button at the top that is for making lists, that has a table view, and it has a profile button that allows us to register, log in, or log out. Our other view controller is essentially our items view controller, which again is very simple. It has a back button, it has a new item text field, it has a table view of all of our items, and finally has a share this button. So our interfaces are quite straightforward, but if throughout your development you wanted to have a look back again and try to understand what was happening, please come back to this lesson. I should properly explain to you what's going on. Now, before I move on, I want to explain a few other things. So that's what our app was about. The next thing is what you will need to know before you jump into this development, or essentially your prerequisites for this development. My assumption throughout this development is that you are at least familiar with the basics of programming and you kind of know what is Xcode, and that you need Xcode and simulator to develop iPhone applications. I won't be spending so much time in explaining the basics of programming. I won't go through things such as what is a variable or what's the method. Most of our time is going to be spent in actually developing a functioning application. And also, I want to mention that all of my lessons are almost below 10 minutes. I try to keep them on average about 5 minutes because I feel like that's going to give you a lot of confidence in moving from one lesson to another. In a very short span of time, you can have something done and then you can move on to do the next thing and next thing. So that's about that. And then by the time you're done developing this application, you should be able to do a variety of applications, whether they need interface design, or whether they need handling information with backend or sharing information with other users. If you want to develop a chat application, you could very well do it by the end of this development, because it pretty much covers all of those areas. And finally, who is this course for? If you want to learn, how to make functioning applications for iPhone, or if you want to learn, if you already are a programmer and you want to just jump start your development with iOS application, I think that this is a very good starting point for you. Also, if you want to learn Firebase properly, most of our time, more than 50% of our time throughout this development is spent with Firebase, trying to understand how we communicate, how we read values, how we write values, and what are the things that we have to keep an eye on out for them. So that's pretty much who is this course for. So with that said, I hope you enjoy this, and I hope to see you in the finish line. Let's get started.